Hello there, and welcome to episode 1 of MyTeam Career Mode for F122. For new viewers, firstly, thank you for tuning in. I'm Guz. I'm an esports commentator that mainly focuses on Rainbow Six, but I thought with the release of F122, I would give it a crack. And for return viewers, I know, 1, I don't make enough content, and 2, this is a big change of pace, but I hope you guys enjoy nonetheless. We'll just skip through, or not skip through, I guess speed through all the settings here. We'll be running no assists outside of pit being on broadcast mode because I think it's a little bit better for the viewer. Full practice, of course, long quali, and 50% race. We'll also be reducing the acclaim rate, or increasing rather, acclaim rate, resource rate, cash rate for the AI to buff them up a little bit, and just to make the experience a little bit longer. Yeah, immersive pit stop, broadcast pit stop, increased safety car, and realistic safety car experience. Now we'll start the AIF at about 96, just because these cars are really difficult trying to get to grips with them. I'll look to try and bump that up to about 100. I think that's what I got to with the last game. Obviously now we jump into the sponsors, and we're going to go, at least initially, I think for RGB from memory, just because finishing 10th or better in the constructors is relatively straightforward, provided you get a couple of points throughout the year, or at least it should be in theory. And for the power unit, we go straight to the Mercedes. One, a little bit of realism. I don't think anyone in real life would sign with Red Bull, but also the Mercedes is pretty good value for money. In terms of the second driver though, I think it's very, very hard to look past our first option, which is Mr. Oscar Piastri from Australia. So we'll have a dual Australian lineup here for this team. But unfortunately, we can't afford all three. So we either need a better sponsor, a worse powertrain, or to drop Oscar. And instead, I elect to go for a different sponsor, XXY, finish 8th or better in the Constructors' Championship, which I think with some good R&D, a little bit of luck, should be relatively achievable once we get to grips with the car.
Hello folks, and welcome to this, a very special edition of Paddock Pass. We're here at the headquarters of Formula One's newest team for an exclusive first look at what they will be bringing to the sport. It's always an exciting moment to welcome a new team onto the grid. However, what makes this occasion a little more special is how strikingly different the cars are this year. Yep, the long-awaited new regulations are finally here, and with them, the start of the next era of Formula One. The 2022 season ushers in a change of direction to the regulations aimed at promoting closer racing, with new aero additions in the form of swooping front and rear wings, along with the new eye-catching 18-inch low-profile tyres that will push tyre technology to the limit. So then, the question remains as to whether this team can grasp the opportunity before them with both hands and lead the charge against the rest of the paddock. We'll find out soon enough, as the new season is just about to begin. But first, let's see the unveiling of the team's car and meet the owner of the brand new Formula One team.
Well, there it is, the launch of our car for the 2022 campaign. I hope you all like it. I think the colours look pretty cool, and of course over time, when we unlock more liveries and sponsors, etc., we can continue to develop the look. As we just advance time, we set a couple of activities and we get ready for practice.
Morning, mate. Mark here. Thanks again for bringing me on board. You found a lot of talented people for this team, and I can't wait to see what we can accomplish. Our journey to the Constructors' Championship starts right here today, and the car is ready to head out when you are.
F's in the chat, of course, for Jeff as we look to start our first lap of the Bahrain circuit. As you can see though, not the best of starts, but eventually we do get going and just head straight in towards the practice programs. Now we didn't get anything too crazy in the practice programs, track acclimatization up first, then race strategy, and later on we get into the qualifying preparation. And these are basically my first laps in the game. I did a little bit of running on the Australian Grand Prix circuit just to get a feel for the settings and tune in my force speed back a little bit and whatnot, but this is really a feel for the new car, or the MyTeam career base car, which, to be completely honest, is an absolute boat. And you can see here in the qualifying practice already, first sector, first lap, we are half a second down already just through that opening complex. And I think maybe there is an issue with the qualifying program because, as you can see, I head on to, I believe this is practice 3, nighttime, try to run the session again, and we are just so far off the pace. And you can actually use Yuki Tsunoda up ahead in the AlphaTauri as a little bit of a speed test. A slightly faster car, of course, but for this lap, we keep pace with him, and once again, already half a second off the Delta, which is absolutely ridiculous. And at this point, I'm still driving relatively conservatively. The traction zone's really tough. The curbs are more deadly than ever. So it's not the fastest, but it was relatively clean, and I was just slowly building up pace. You can see in some parts I am gaining a couple of tenths on that Delta, but particularly through the traction zones, it just blows out. And the straight line speed as well amongst the AI and amongst the Delta is pretty widely regarded as broken at the moment. You'll see just how much time we bleed on the straights. I don't know if it's because the AI are able to run less aero because they have traction control, or what exactly the root cause of that is, but as you can see, way off the pace on the Delta, yet we're still relatively close behind Tsunoda, who's also running softs, and obviously at the same time in this session, we cut the corner there a little bit, but for the most part, relatively clean. And yeah, unfortunately, the qualifying program not quite going our way. Now, if I remember correctly, I did go on to actually, this would be practice 2, because in practice 3 I just did the simulation and tried to get the resource points back, which I think was relatively successful. So a 131.625, apparently that's going to get us 22nd place in qualifying. It's good enough for 11th though in practice 2, so a decent time. And again, really just using this as an opportunity to build up our confidence, build up our pace, because these cars are really, really tricky to drive. They certainly feel a lot more realistic and a lot better, in quotation marks, but certainly quite tough as we prepare ourselves for qualifying. The goal here, of course, really to just try our best to push for Q2, try and finish in that top 15 outside of the cutoff. I believe we are the 3rd slowest team on the performance index, so with a decent lap, we should be able to just sneak through. But obviously the practice program suggesting that we might be a long, long way behind the rest of the competition. AI, of course, at 96 difficulty, will look to continually bump that up. Bahrain historically is a track that I'm honestly quite poor at, but I did find actually with these cars, once you got into a rhythm, it wasn't all that bad. In our first lap, straight away into P3, we can see there as the session progresses, 2 minutes to go, and we are now back down in 19th, so we need to improve here on this lap, but I know that I can with a bit more aggression. Now we try and let Albon through here, but again, the AI just seem to be a little bit lost sometimes, don't know when you're on an out lap or want to let the AI through it. It does create a little bit of a mess. So we instead decide to just send it straight in front of him, ignore him, and hope that we can maintain that gap and he won't trip over us later on into the lap. ERS into hot lap mode, extend out wide, heading into the last corner, try and get a good run onto this front straight, try and pop DRS as early as we can, flat on the floor. Plenty of battery charge remaining and that'll be enough to sustain us for this lap. The delta basically spot on to our last attempts to break just after that 100-meter board. Looked to hit the apex, but we hit it a little bit too hard, the curb bouncing us out wide. Not the best line through then, as you can see, about 3/10 down through that first complex, causing me a lot of issues in that practice program, but I'm still confident I can try and bring it back, and at this point we really do have nothing to lose. We get a couple of tenths through the next couple of corners though, as you can see. The S's as well, a lot more confident. Those curbs, of course, so dangerous. We clattered them on the outside, and as you can see now, quite even with the delta. And we'll be looking to just try and find a couple of tenths back. That gap, 2/15, so close. Decent run into the DRS zone, onto this long straight. Using every bit of track that we have. 2 tenths now up. Looking to just convert it from here. I don't know if 2 tenths will be enough though. Probably need to push for at least half a second if possible. Not too bad through there. A little bit wide, that curb again. Really deadly. The fidelity of the curbs in this game much improved as we headed into the last corner. Once again, we just hit that curb, which unsettles the car a little bit. Probably could have gained another half a tenth or even a tenth through there, but nonetheless, flat to the line, 4 tenths found, and it's P14. If the standings stay where they are, we will make it through to the second qualifying session. We'll get bumped down to 15th. And now down to 16th, so our fate is sealed. We will not make it out of Q1, just falling short there. It was a bit of a sloppy lap. The first hairpin costing us about 3 tenths. If we tidied that up though, as the standings will show, we would have made it through. No point dwelling on it though. It's time to get ready for the race.
Months of rumour and speculation all come to an end today as we return to racing for the opening event of what promises to be an enthralling season. Welcome along then to round 1 of this year's Formula One World Championship. Formula One returns to the desert today on this exceptional 3.36 mile circuit. 15 corners provide plenty of overtaking opportunities, and it could be a strategic race, this one, with Sakhir notorious for eating up the rear tyres. Watch out for drivers managing their rubber at some point during the Grand Prix. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. A fantastic effort from Charles Leclerc yesterday, and it's put him on pole, and Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Sainz, Russell, Sergio Perez, and Hamilton, Bottas, Fernando Alonso, Ocon, and Kevin Magnussen, Mick Schumacher, Tsunoda, Lando Norris, and Vettel, Stroll, Gasly, Mir, and Oscar Piastri, Latifi, Albon, Ricciardo, and Guan Yu Zhou. It's almost time for the lights to go out, so let's head down to the track where preparations are underway. A new season then, a clean slate where anything could happen. Anthony Davidson is with me today as once again we get another year of Formula One underway.
We're into those tense few minutes before the first race then. Everyone's a little bit nervous about reliability. They haven't been running in the hot, turbulent wake of other cars in practice, and they've not been pushing at 100% for long durations. Let's hope no one has to deal with any nasty surprises.
Well, here we are then on the grid for the first race of the 2022 season. In terms of the strategy, we're going to go with the, I believe it was the personalized option, which is the softs onto mediums strategy, which I don't believe any of the other AI are running in this race. Of course, in this season, not that it would have mattered for us, but the top 10 now can actually run any compound they want, not restricted by what they ran in qualifying. As we launch off the line for the formation lap, critical in this year's game, need to make sure we get temps into those tyres ready for the start of the race. In terms of our expectations, top 10 would be incredible, but we have to be very realistic. Starting towards the back, we'll be looking to just make up as many spots as we can, and if opportunities arise, we'll want to make sure that we're there to seize them. As we look to form the grid, new addition to the game, you now manually park yourself in the grid spot. Bit of a burnout there just at the end. Really want to make sure we have temps in those rear tyres as we look to park absolutely perfectly, just angling a little bit towards the inside to see if maybe we can cut in and maybe make some ground down the inside. But the lights come on now. 5 red lights. And away we go. A pretty good launch off the line, it must be said, gaining a little bit of ground there on the AI. ERS straight into overtake mode, and we elect to go around the outside. Can't really find much of a gap though. Stroll just tapping the back of Norris there, losing a bit of his front wing as we look to just hold it around the outside and in fact make up a bit of ground. So not the worst of starts there. Of course, tyres still a little bit cold maybe, so we have to be really careful here and ensure that we don't hit anyone or spin off. Simulation damage, of course, so any small tap could really be quite a disaster. Front wing incredibly fragile, and we don't want to be pitting early on in this race. We need to try and make ground with the soft compound tyre. The runners around us on the mediums, and we can use this to our advantage. Obviously the tyre will drop off eventually, but if we can make it work for the first couple of laps, that would be good. And even better would just be to latch on to some of these midfield runners, get in that DRS range and allow them to sort of slingshot us through the pack. Alongside Vettel though, a bit of a side-by-side battle. Vettel looks to hold down the inside, but there's no real grip out there. We're able to hold it around the outside, and now the train begins to form a bit of a gap as well, extending towards the 2 Haas cars in front. Looking to try and stay within a second, but easier said than done with the boat under us, to be honest. It's not the easiest of cars to drive. That said though, a clean start, that's what we wanted. P14 now out of 22 runners, and we are just within striking distance of Schumacher. 8/10 at the moment as we head on to the 3rd lap, still within DRS range, which is really important. If we can maintain that and again have him sort of tow us along, that would be the most optimal of outcomes, and we do in fact get DRS here heading on to the 4th lap. Also extending a bit of a gap behind to Guan Yu Zhou, but there's a car spun around. Who's that? It's the Red Bull of Verstappen. He's spun it at the first corner, and a safety car has been deployed by the FIA. The AI are a lot more prone to mistakes in this year's game, and Verstappen, championship contender, spinning out there on the first corner. Now I believe he's still running in the race, but disappointing for him, and you can see me frantically flicking the MFD, considering a change of strategy, go into the hards early, commit to the 1-stop and hope that the tyres survive until the end of the race. And next time around we do commit to that strategy, the only driver on the grid electing to pit. This will send us towards the rear of the grid. I think there's a couple of cars still behind us though due to lap 1 damage, as the hards now will be fitted on lap number 4, an estimated life of 30 laps. So they should, in theory, take us to the end of this Grand Prix. As we get ready to start racing once again, a bit of a poor run though out of that last corner, starting in 20th place behind Alonso. As we make our run now down to the first corner, hopefully no shenanigans this time, but the yellow flag flashing, cars slowing down, we swing wide and hit Stroll, Magnussen on the outside, out of the race. So there's been a big incident on the restart, and now we have side pod damage, floor damage. That contact with Stroll will cost us a lot of time in this race, but thankfully we didn't lose our front wing, so we should be okay to continue for now. We obviously can't pit for that other damage, but now we've spun out as well. Probably a combination of the cold tyres and not really having a feel for that loss of grip as of yet. A devastating restart bumps us down to 21st position. No signs of a safety car after that incident on the restart either.
More drag than normal. Just be warned, the underbody showing heavy damage. Tyre condition still looking good.
And as you heard, a lot of damage now to the car. As we look at the replay, the 2 Haas cars making contact. There's a Constantina effect at that hairpin. It's a very awkward incident on board with Stroll now as we see that contact, which felt and looked on my POV like a lot more significant than it did to his. We get a bit of payback though, taking out his front wing, but I think ultimately it's probably more so my fault. I was really scared of those cars in front, didn't want to make contact front to rear, and instead looked to avoid it, but wasn't really paying attention to Stroll on my outside, and unfortunately we did make contact. Nonetheless though, we soldier on. We're going to look to try and take these hards to the end and hope that the time we saved pitting under the safety car and only doing a one stop will not only be a gain on the rest of the field, but hopefully make up for the fact that we're going to lose a lot of time due to the irreparable damage that we now have on the chassis. In the points though, at the moment, lap 14, so about halfway through the Grand Prix, and things are actually looking okay. Bottas though flies straight past us, proving that we are a long way away still from the midfield, and no point in fighting that. We'll let him go past and hope that maybe the AI are two-stopping potentially, which would probably be a little bit crazy, but they might do it. And maybe another safety car down the line could help us. As you can see, that mid-corner snap oversteer, really prominent if you're not super careful on this year's game. We look to, though, just stick with Bottas here, stay within a second, hope to get at least 1 or 2 laps of DRS just for an additional bit of pace.
We're currently trailing our teammate by 14.0 seconds.
A few more cars in the pits elevates us back up into the points, now P9. Verstappen closing behind though, and Vettel as well close by. Both of those cars will be significantly faster than us. So we just have to keep hoping that the stars align here for a potential points finish and the team's first points in the very first race of Formula 1. For now though, it's about just being consistent, which is probably the most difficult part of this new game. If you just curb the aggression a little bit and you're careful, you can be a little bit more consistent, but the moment you sort of go over that threshold, you will be immediately punished in this game. If you take a curb the wrong way or look to accelerate a little bit too quick, you'll just be instantly spun. We fast forward now on to lap 16, and Verstappen has, as expected, closed down that gap quite significantly. Bottas ahead, extending his lead on me as well. And much like Bottas, Verstappen will just overtake me here on the straight. Probably should have let him go a little bit earlier. Instead, I didn't want to lose too much momentum into the corner, and we make contact. Verstappen's so slow through the mid-corner. And immediately I want to check that front wing.
The side pods are taking damage. You might start to pick up a little bit extra drag. There's damage to the underbody. Expect to feel significant effects in terms of performance. No need to worry about the tyre condition for now. Everything's looking good.
So really just a reminder of that chassis damage from earlier. So it seems we've
5 seconds.
really gotten away with it there. I thought for sure that would be a front end plate, or maybe even worse. The contact did feel quite bad, but we soldier on. Verstappen now 18 seconds ahead on the 23rd lap. Guan Yu Zhou behind will pass as I once more oversteer. The tyre wear now really coming into play. It's quite difficult sort of having to dance around the track, and talk about dancing around the track. 3 wide, Oscar Piastri down the inside tries to absolutely send it on me, and instead has now lost me 2 positions, well 3 if you include him. So not the best teamwork there, but nonetheless good to see him hungry for points. Alonso and Vettel able to get by though pretty scot-free. I was hoping that I'd be able to hold them up, maybe even to the end of the race. A bit of teamwork as well could have been used there, but unfortunately not meant to be, and now we're in P13 outside of the points. Oscar Piastri as well trailing. It's a bit of a disaster there, unfortunately. Not an ideal set of circumstances. We'll see if we can just hold on to Oscar now, who, again, should be faster than our same car, but I'm assuming he doesn't have the same extent of damage that we do. Alonso and Vettel, I'm sure, will continue to push forward. And I'm hoping that I can once more get a tow. Valtteri Bottas, unfortunately, out of the Bahrain Grand Prix. And we're just keeping an eye on that. Could that potentially lead to a late safety car? It looks like he's maybe parked in an awkward spot. And talk about awkward. The 3 cars in front of us on the hard compound tyre pitting on lap 24. They're on a fresher set of tyres than I am. So super surprised to see the AI pit at that stage of the race. Would have expected them to just run them all the way to the end, but maybe they're afraid of the tyre wear that I'm experiencing, once again loose through that first complex. As we have a look at that tyre wear, around about 40% on average across all 4 tyres. Still relatively drivable, but obviously not ideal, and Ricciardo senses an opportunity now. Right behind me, only 3/10, desperate for a point after his disaster in qualifying, and he sends it down the inside. Very clean overtake from him, nothing I could do to defend it. And I don't think I would have been able to hold him off for 6 laps, or 5.5 laps would have been very, very tough. So really well done there by Ricciardo, who, again, I believe he started 21st. Super disappointing qualifying. I guess much like the McLaren result in real life. But he's been able to fight himself back into the top 10, so some good points for McLaren. And now we need to be mindful of Latifi, who's only about half a second behind, steaming at a rate of knots. Was not expecting him to be as quick as he is, but again, probably not got damage, so even the Williams is probably faster than us in raw pace at the moment. We also fall out of DRS range already from Ricciardo, showing just how big that speed deficit is. Latifi closing in, just reining in the tenths. An easy pass for him down the inside, and I'm not going to bother contesting that. Down to P12 now. And the chance of points just continues to dwindle. We really need something to land on our lap here. Getting on to lap number 26 now. Sonoda, of course, faster behind. He's probably going to catch us as well. Not really much we can do to defend against him, unfortunately. But Esteban Ocon is out of the race, and the FIA have deployed the safety car. The engineer noting debris on the track, so not sure if they were related, but nonetheless, on lap 26, the safety car is being deployed, and I was toying with maybe going for a bold strategy call, and I committed to it. We weren't in points range. I thought, what have I got to lose? May as well chuck on some softs and see if maybe I could fight my way back into the top 10 with a couple of laps to go. The right rear, though, unfortunately slow, and the pack behind able to pass, so we're going to be right at the very back. P19 of the 19 cars still remaining in this race. And at this point, I know it's basically over. I don't think I'm going to get 9 spots in a couple of laps, but the safety car has already gone back in. So the debris cleared, only a couple of cars actually behind the safety car under its control. Nonetheless, though, we need to quickly find some pace, but unfortunately, even straight off the bat off the restart, falling way behind. Our car's simply just too slow. We'll see if we can do something. We have plenty of battery in storage, and we'll deploy it as aggressively as we can, but unfortunately, I think my strategy has probably proved more costly than it would have been. But like I said, finding a couple of positions on those worn hards so late into the race would have been a very tall ask, and from this point onwards, it's really just about trying to finish the race. Just continue to get experience in the car. Lap 29 now, and as you can see, the gap up ahead basically maintaining, if not extending just a little bit. The gap to Oscar, 1.3 seconds outside of DRS range, and halfway through the lap I just decided to preserve the gearbox a little bit, electing not to shift for the remainder of the lap. Just trying to conserve that gearbox as much as possible. Probably, in theory, could have done it a little bit earlier, but nonetheless we come on to the back straight and we cross the line in P19. Bit unlucky during that race. I thought that maybe points would be possible, but positive signs. We learned a lot about the car this weekend, and I'm very, very keen for the rest of the season.
Smiling faces on the pit wall then after that superb win here at Sakir. And rightly so, a brilliant effort from the whole team. What do you think it was today, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection, a shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
Ferrari are at it again. An excellent performance at today's Grand Prix, and they're certainly a team that know what they're doing out there. So let's review the drivers' standings. Charles Leclerc's points today take him to the top of the championship standings. Well, after an incredible day of racing, who was your driver of the day, Ant?
It's an interesting one today. On balance, I think I have to call out Alexander Albon. A really solid drive from him today, and one that he and his team should be proud of.
It's time to check out the constructors' standings. Ferrari take the lead at the top of the table. Well, what an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.